Next on Unsolved Mysteries, an accused rapist jumps bail and heads right for the ski slopes of Switzerland. This Civil War military building is now home to the ghosts of Union soldiers, or so the story goes. Oliver Munson never imagined that buying a car would make him a key witness in a trial and also lead to his disappearance. And 248 American airborne troopers die in a plane crash. Authorities say there was ice on the wings, but others say there was something deadly in the cargo. 5 compelling cases, some just waiting to be solved. And maybe you hold the key. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Baltimore, Maryland.
It's like it, huh? Good. Yeah. Let me show you the motor. Okay.
Oliver Munson had just bought a used but classic DATSUN 240Z.
So you like?
Yeah. You have the title and registration?
Yeah, you got my money? Yep.
He had no idea that the seller, Dennis Watson, was the leader of a sophisticated car theft ring. Oliver's new car had been stolen just 3 months earlier.
I'm a man or the proud owner of a Z.
Thanks.
Enjoy it, yeah?
All right.
All right.
Watson owned the garage, but it was actually a cover for his chop shop, a place where stolen cars were dismantled and sold for parts, or simply resold with fake papers. Authorities had been quietly investigating Watson for weeks. Then, they finally decided to put him out of business.
What's the summons, right? Please, raise. Oh, all right. No, what the hell is this, man? You can't come out here.
Police discovered illegal titles, partially dismantled autos, and stolen vehicle ID tags, everything they needed to make a case against Dennis Watson.
5 Maryland plates.
One of the names that appeared in the confiscated records was Oliver Munson.
We continue to check paperwork. We find that Oliver Munson has a Z car, not knowing at that time whether or not Oliver Munson had bought this car or if he was involved with Dennis Watson. And as a result, we took the car as evidence until such time as we could continue an investigation to determine what exactly was his knowledge of the car.
Detective Goodwin had a conversation with Oliver Munson.
You guys took my car. What, did I have tickets or something?
No, sir. The car was stolen. It's a stolen vehicle.
Oh, no, I paid for the car.
How much did you pay for the car, sir?
$1,200 and some trades.
And who did you buy the car from?
Dennis Watson.
Dennis Watson? Do you know this Dennis Watson, or have you ever dealt with him before?
No, I never met him before.
My feeling was at that time, and still is, that he had bought the car, he had thinking that the car was, in fact, a legitimate car.
So I have to go to court?
Yes, sir. You will have to go to court and testify to the fact of how you got the car.
Detective Goodwin said that Oliver was nervous about testifying, but agreed, knowing that he really had no choice.
Call me, okay?
A year passed before the trial began. 3 days before Oliver was to appear in court, he left for work as usual. He was never seen again.
Oliver would rarely miss school, and on that particular Monday, when he didn't arrive, some of the staff and the kids started to worry that this is not a usual practice for Oliver, and maybe something was, occurring, something was wrong with him.
Oliver's brother James was also worried.
Oliver, you in here?
He went to Oliver's house to look for him.
Oliver, it's It's me, James.
I just thought maybe that he was sick, and I didn't know if he was unconscious or whatever in the house. I didn't know.
3 days later, Oliver's car was found just a few blocks from his home. One tire was flat. School papers and a sack lunch were on the front seat, but there was no evidence to suggest what had happened to Oliver.
At that time, I felt that there was something wrong. Then the decision was made here that we were looking at a kidnapping or a homicide.
Dennis Watson became a prime suspect, and that led to another discovery. 2 witnesses scheduled to testify against Watson in previous trials had died under mysterious circumstances. Could it be that Munson had been the next in line? 10 years earlier, a man named Clinton Glenn had burned to death in a car registered to Watson. Glenn was scheduled to testify against Watson in an armed robbery trial the very next day. Based on the testimony of another witness, Watson was indicted for Glenn's murder. However, this new witness suddenly died of a suspicious drug overdose, and the murder charges were dropped. And now, Oliver was missing. But with no evidence to implicate Watson, the investigation stalled. Then police heard from a man named Hilton Solomon. Hilton's car was stolen just hours before Oliver disappeared. Inside the car, Hilton found a hat that would later be identified as similar to one owned by Oliver Munson.
Hilton Solomon took his car home after it was released by Baltimore City, and he decided to clean the car. While he was cleaning, he found several receipts from a video store. On these receipts was the name Oliver Munson. We went down and looked at the car, looked underneath of the seat. I found a spent cartridge case.
Red smudges were also found on one of the receipts, and tests revealed that the stains were human blood, type O positive. Authorities believe that Oliver was murdered, but with no record showing his blood type and no other hard evidence, the official investigation reached a dead end. As it turns out, Oliver's disappearance had no apparent effect on the outcome of Watson's car theft trial. Watson pled guilty and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was paroled after serving half his term. However, Oliver Munson has never been found. If you have any information about his disappearance, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Next, a tragic plane crash kills 248 soldiers. The government says that the cause was ice on the wings. Others believe the explanation is far more sinister. On December 11, 1985, a unit of the 101st Airborne Division left Cairo, Egypt, on a chartered plane much like this one. They were going home to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, after a 6-month peacekeeping mission in the Sinai. After one stop in Germany, they landed for refueling at Gander Airport in Newfoundland, Canada. Just after takeoff, the DC-8 suddenly crashed. The crew and all the soldiers were killed. Wreckage was strewn over nearly a quarter mile. Almost immediately, a terrorist organization, Islamic Jihad, claimed responsibility. But U.S. Army officials quickly dismissed the possibility of terrorist involvement. Later, a Canadian Board of Inquiry stated that ice on the plane's wings had brought it down. However, 4 of the board's 9 members publicly disagreed, insisting that ice did not cause the crash.
There was certainly some kind of an explosion, a small explosion that disabled the control system. But what caused that explosion, whether it was sabotage or whether it was the accidental detonation of some kind of military equipment that was carried against regulations, we really don't have a better idea than we had in 1988.
To the 4 dissenting board members, the crash itself seemed highly irregular. Usually, in a takeoff crash, large sections of the plane remain intact, and many passengers can survive. But at Gander, the wreckage was extremely fragmented, and no one survived.
A normal kind of takeoff accident can be quite serious and can involve a fire, but basically the aircraft isn't completely destroyed.
The U.S. government strongly denied that either explosives or ammunition were carried as cargo. However, eyewitness reports from the Cairo airport contradict the government's claim. They say that several large wooden boxes were loaded onto the plane. Many believe that the boxes contained some type of classified weapons. One of the rescue workers, Harvey Day, said that he saw 5 wooden boxes at the Gander crash site.
Sir, that's as far as you can go. You'll have to go back.
What's in the boxes?
I decided to walk down to see what was in this area.
Is that from the plane?
Sir, I can't answer that.
But I stopped and looked, and I saw what people are beginning to say didn't exist. I saw 5 large wooden boxes. They were black, a bit burnt from the fire. I saw things like missiles and little metal boxes. They looked like ammunition boxes. And it was all piled up very neatly into this cordon-off area.
Official military business. If you don't leave, I'll have you removed by force from the premises. Now, just go on.
All right.
Day says that he also saw an unusual pile of wreckage burning out of control. 2 firefighters were trying to put it out with water.
What's going on, eh? Keeps flaring up. We're gonna have to keep pouring water on it. It's that bad?
And the minute he took the water away, it just flared back up again. And he said, we've got to do this, he said, till he said it burns out, he said it cools down to the point we can remove what's there.
Within weeks, Harvey and several other rescue workers began to complain of health problems. The symptoms sounded suspiciously like radiation poisoning.
I think we had over 30 who described some type of malady or sickness as a result of the crash. They ranged from liver problems to what people thought were heart attacks and just general illnesses. And this is what was checked out. And it got to be rather scary.
When the reports came in, his receptionist called me, and I went to him. And I'll never forget this. He said, Harvey, how much do you drink? I said, pardon me, how much do you drink? I said, I don't drink. I've never drank. Why? You've got a liver, he said, is equivalent to somebody who's been drinking excessively for 20 years or more. I couldn't believe what he said.
According to one unnamed source, the U.S. government sealed its records of the crash for 70 years. However, several government agencies, including the Department of Defense and the National Transportation Safety Board, deny that any such records ever existed.
The files on the Gander incident would not be sealed for 70 years if it were simply ice. We know that there had to be something very, very politically embarrassing that could have been very harmful to the Reagan administration that had to be covered up.
As one family member put it, she wants to know if her family member died protecting this country or if he died because our government was protecting itself.
U.S. government investigators did appear to behave strangely. For one thing, the crash site was bulldozed within 3 months, a highly unusual practice. The United States Army says that it was done simply to discourage souvenir hunters. As a rule, downed airplanes are reassembled in order to study the crash. But in a highly unusual move, authorities quickly buried the wreckage from the Gander site in a dump. Dr. Douglas Phillips and his wife ZONA were troubled by the official reports. Their son had died in the crash, and they formed an organization called Families for Truth About Gander. They requested several pieces of the wreckage. They were surprised when the government actually sent them. An expert hired to analyze the scraps claimed that the edges were bent outwards, showing that a blast had occurred inside the plane.
I think the airplane exploded in midair and then went down and it hit the ground with a gigantic fireball ensuing upon hitting when the fuel ignited. But there's no doubt in my mind that there was a fire or an explosion while the plane was still in flight.
Dr. Phillips turned up one final and chilling fact. Autopsies revealed that many of the dead soldiers had a significant amount of carbon monoxide in their bodies.
The toxicology report showed that the victims had indeed breathed in carbon monoxide prior to the plane hitting the ground and exploding. This had to be from a detonation, a fire or explosion on board the craft.
In 1990, Congress convened a hearing on the Gander disaster. The committee faulted the government's investigation, but did not insist on a new one. So the families of the soldiers who were killed at Gander are left to wonder why and how their loved ones really died. Next, have ghosts from the Civil War made this military museum their home. The first shots of the Civil War were fired in South Carolina during April of 1861. Over the next 4 years, the battle raged along a 1,000-mile front. Although most of the fighting took place in the South, it eventually spread across the country, all the way to Wilmington, California. In 1862, a military outpost was built near the Los Angeles harbor. It was called the Drum Barracks and was a key center for training and processing troops. Today, all that remains is a single building, which is now a museum, with some very unlikely tour guides.
I don't call them ghosts, or I don't call them hauntings usually. What I do believe in is we call them spirits.
You can lock the rooms. At night I do. I make a check, in fact. Very religiously I check all the rooms. They're locked, the lights are off, the shades are down. And you come here at 8 o'clock in the morning and the light in the parlor jolly well might be on, and then again it might not, but the shades may be up.
Marge O'Brien was hired to restore the rundown building after it was declared an historic landmark.
It was very dark, very sad feeling as you walk through. And it was just kind of a building, just kind of standing here saying, help me.
Marge, a team of craftsmen and volunteers, worked for months overhauling the museum. The old building slowly came back to life, in more ways than one.
I'm sitting in my office and something will take my attention. Either a window will rattle, the roses will hit against the window, the wind possibly, but something attracts me to the fact that I should be checking something. I will walk over to the parlor. 9 chances out of 10 when I have this feeling and I open the door, more likely than not the lights on the table are on. Most times, I will walk up the stairs and check the gunroom. Very often, that too has the lights on and the window blinds open, even though they have been closed and down. Because the rule here is that after every tour, you pull the shades down, turn off the light, and lock the door.
Yasmin, one of the volunteers, also began to believe that the building was indeed haunted.
We were up there in the gun room, cleaning, dusting. I put down the blinds, turned off the light, and locked the room and left. Came downstairs and left the building. There was nobody around.
10:30. The silver needs polishing.
Okay, we'll do that. When I looked up, I saw the blind went up really slow. Did you just see that?
What?
The blind went up by itself. It gave me the impression as if someone was holding it, you know, someone was doing it.
To me, a ghost was like Casper the Friendly Ghost or some movie or something, you know. I guess, you know, one doesn't believe it until they actually are really convinced.
Fred Duran, an exterminator for the city of Los Angeles, became a believer during one of his regular stops at the museum.
As I got into the kitchen that morning, I heard some footsteps behind me, and I thought it was the caretaker.
I need to get some water.
Yeah. And I didn't pay any attention to it.
Have you seen Maria?
No, I haven't seen her.
As I turned around, there was this guy there. I thought it was kind of odd because he was in a Civil War outfit. So as I was going out, you know, I saw the caretaker there and the workmen also. And I just asked him, I said, you know, hey, the guy that lives here takes his job seriously. And they said, you saw the captain's ghost.
If Fred said he saw it, he saw it. I have no doubts in that. Fred's a very honest man. My reaction is, I wonder why, at this point, what the reason was at this point in time, why he had to come now, and why to Fred.
Marge asked psychic Barbara Connor to search the museum for ghosts.
Oh, this is the part. Oh.
She says, we seem to have some creaks and groans, and I thought, right away, mentally, I thought to myself, oh, it's an old house, it's just settling.
Often when I come in, the light is on.
According to Barbara, the drum barracks was full of ghosts, and she claimed to have met several of them in the officers' lounge. 2 were playing cards. Another stood by the window looking through the curtain. But one phantom seemed more aggressive than the rest.
He looked at me, and he says, I want this chair closer to the fireplace because I'm cold. I said, this gentleman that's sitting in this chair here has a foot that is, his boot is too tight for him.
What was interesting is my research showed that Colonel Curtis, who was the commander here the longest, had frostbitten his left foot when he was fighting Indians up in Washington. Right around the ankle, above where the nerve endings were, was a great deal of pain, which he suffered much of his life. He would wear a boot that was a size smaller so that he could have more control of that foot, and he dragged it. There is no way Barbara could have known that when she walked into the room. I had just started to uncover this research.
Barbara says that she continued to have visions upstairs, which seemed to explain some of the strange noises.
There's a little boy sitting here. I told Marge, I said, there's a little boy here, and he's throwing the ball up against the wall. She says, well, we've heard this thump, 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 and we couldn't figure out what it is. And I said, if you want him to stop, just tell him to stop, and he'll stop.
Now I'd like to take you into the storage room. I don't often...
At the end of the tour, Barbara said she saw the ghosts of Colonel Curtis and his officers in a planning session.
The colonel was standing there at the table, and when we came in, he left what he was doing and went over and started digging in this box, and he turned to me and mentally projected he wants his award. He wants the award. He's trying to find an award. And I said, what award? And he says, I have an award. I want my award, and I want it on that wall.
Well, I had never heard of a plaque before, and I don't remember anything ever hanging in that storage room. But I discovered later that when he left Washington, that Colonel Curtis did receive an award for his work with the Indians, and possibly that could have been the plaque.
Commander Curtis, gentlemen, it's time to go home. Lights out. If you want them back on, that's fine with me.
Do the long-dead spirits of the Civil War still roam the drum barracks at the long-abandoned military base? Well, for those who have experienced those hauntings, they believe that the museum is alive with history. Coming up, the conviction of an accused rapist rests on a single piece of evidence: a latch on the back seat of a car. Darien, Connecticut. 40 miles from New York City, it's one of the country's most exclusive communities. At 18, Alex Kelly was one of Darien's brightest young men. He came from a wealthy, devoted family and had a promising future. On a winter night, he met a young woman at a party at this house. Just before midnight, he offered to take her home in his girlfriend's Jeep. But according to the young woman, Kelly didn't drive her home. Instead, he pulled into this secluded cul-de-sac and raped her. 4 days later, this time at a nearby country club, another party, another young woman, and Alex Kelly faced yet another accusation of rape. Alex Kelly was arrested for both attacks. He denied the charges, claiming that the sexual encounters were consensual. Kelly was released on a $200,000 bail, but when the jury selection began, Alex Kelly left town. He would remain a fugitive for the next 8 years. In the summer of 1994, finally authorities raided the Kelly home and learned the surprising truth about Alex's years on the run.
Alex Kelly was leading the good life overseas. He traveled all over. His passport was stamped with, just dozens of countries in and out of Greece and Sweden and France. And he spent a lot of his time at ski resorts, living the high life. And, he would write letters home talking about his hang gliding and his parasailing. And in one letter, he even said, "I could live like this forever." I mean, he wasn't exactly suffering.
Photographs even showed Kelly's parents visiting him while he was in hiding. And investigators also found an unmailed letter which revealed Kelly's address in Sweden.
So Alex knows that law enforcement's closing in on him now. Tom Puccio is hired by the family as Alex's lawyer. Puccio met with Alex in Europe to negotiate the terms of his surrender.
A short time later, Kelly surrendered and was extradited to the U.S., where he was charged with sexual assault and kidnapping. He was released again on a $1 million bond. The trial for the first rape began a year and a half later. Most days, Kelly arrived at court hand in hand with his old high school girlfriend. The star witness was Kelly's first victim. She described her experience in harrowing detail.
At one point, she said that his hand was on her neck the entire time before he pushed her into the back seat of the Jeep.
After the victim's testimony, the case would revolve around one clue: the latch on a car seat. Defense attorney Thomas Puccio argued that if Kelly's hand was always on the victim's throat, it would have been impossible for him to both unlatch and lower the back seat with his one free hand.
First order of business is to thank the jury.
The case ended in a mistrial after the six-person jury deadlocked.
People have a way of doing that,
Later, some of the jurors said that the testimony about the seat latch played a major role in their deliberations. Some even concluded that the rape never happened.
The victim stated that he reached over and grabbed her by the throat. He immediately spread his legs over her body, was choking her.
Connie Williams was one of the jurors at the mistrial.
He reached around, and at some point she heard a clicking noise. The clicking noise was the lever being pulled.
He doubts Kelly could have pulled the latch and lowered the back seat with only one hand.
There was no way I can do it with one hand.
We decided to test the back seat latch that was key to Kelly's defense. We asked an engineering consulting firm to conduct an impartial demonstration. Our consultants found the Jeep with the same kind of back seat latch.
It's all right, that's always like that.
The actor playing Kelly was simply told where the latch was and that it needed to be lifted to release the seat. He was then told to simulate an attack and at the same time lower the back seat using only one hand. The actor was able to operate the latch just once in 4 tries. The seat latch evidence had undermined the prosecution's case during their first trial of Alex Kelly. Prosecutors had a different strategy at Kelly's retrial. This time, they relied on the victim's statements made just after the attacks. When her memory was fresh, she had reported that Kelly took his hand off her throat in order to lower the back seat. This time, the jury convicted Kelly of rape. Kelly pleaded no contest to the second rape charge. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison and was paroled 10 years later at the age of 40.
Well, I wish there was some way I could explain to you how sorry I am for what I've done. But sorry isn't something I can just tell you. It's only something I can show you through my actions. And I fully understand that no matter what I feel or what I do, it'll never take away the pain that I've caused.
Alex Kelly will be registered as a sex offender for the rest of his life. Coming up, a young mother serving a life sentence for murdering her infant son is proven innocent, thanks to Unsolved Mysteries. St. Louis, Missouri. Patty Stallings rushes her 3-month-old son, Ryan, to the hospital. He has suffered from chronic gastric distress since birth, but this day, the diagnosis is shocking. Ryan has apparently been poisoned with ethylene glycol, a substance found in antifreeze.
Just have to ask you a few questions, if you could come in for a moment.
Police were called to the hospital to question Ryan's parents, Patty and David Stallings.
We were split up and talked to by detectives. They were saying that they knew that that baby had been poisoned by either me or my husband. I was devastated. I was blown away. I just could not believe that they could even think. Ryan was my world.
While the investigation was going on, Patty and David were only allowed to visit Ryan 1 hour each week. Patty was left alone with Ryan for a short time on the 6th visit. 3 days later, Ryan suffered from another severe attack of vomiting. The diagnosis again was poisoning, and Ryan died 72 hours later. Patty Stallings was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail. She was not allowed to attend Ryan's funeral. At the time, Patty didn't know that she was pregnant again. Her second son, DJ, was born while Patty was in jail, waiting trial for the murder of her first son. When DJ was 2 weeks old, he began to have symptoms identical to Ryan's. But this time, the illness was diagnosed as a rare genetic disorder, methylmalonic acidemia, or MMA. Its symptoms are often confused with ethylene glycol poisoning. Despite DJ's diagnosis, Patty was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of her son Ryan. DJ was placed in the custody of the state.
I've lost one child to MMA. My second child is stricken with MMA and may not live. He's a year old now, and they're still not sure how to treat him. I lost my freedom. I've lost everything.
Update. Immediately after this story aired, we received calls from doctors from all over the country who said that they were familiar with MMA. Patty's new attorneys petitioned the court to grant her another trial based on the fact that she had previously received ineffectual counsel. After serving almost 2 years, Patty was granted a new trial and was released from prison.
After the Unsolved Mysteries aired, people were writing and calling and just wanting to know, how can we help? And I can't thank those people enough, because, I mean, through all of that, wheels started turning and everything just started pushing forward really fast.
Along with Ryan's remaining...
A short time later, a press conference was held in St. Louis, and Dr. PIERO RINALDO of Yale University revealed that independent blood tests showed Ryan had definitely died of MMA.
Unfortunately, we can't undo the suffering that the Stallings have endured during this entire ordeal. And I apologize to them both personally and for the state of Missouri.
All charges against Patty Stallings were dropped. A few days later, just over 2 years after his brother's death, DJ came home for the first time.
Just want to make up for the year and a half that we didn't have him, and it's hard to make up that much time, but I'm doing the best I can.
His condition is very scary, but we've tackled so many hard things that, you know, we've just kind of said, we'll beat this too. And with that attitude, I know that DJ will do all right and that we'll do okay. He is a miracle child, and we're lucky to have DJ, and we have our whole life back. It's like we're starting over. It's indescribably wonderful.
They were a young couple living the dream, but then they crossed paths with a neighbor who police described as a ticking time bomb.
Hey, let's make a pit stop at the Grand Canyon.
As they started out for their new life in Denver, Colorado, Deborah Loiselle and her fiancé, Jason Horsley, were excited about living in the big city for the first time.
You're gonna get your own house, girl. What do you think?
They bought a house in one of Denver's inner city neighborhoods and soon fell in love with their new surroundings. Everything was going well until one afternoon when Deborah had a strange encounter with her neighbor.
Hello? What's going on?
What's wrong with your dog? Your dog's crazy.
I saw you harassing her.
Anybody harassing that dog?
We're gonna be neighbors, so let's get along.
She learned that her angry neighbor was Malika Griffin, a woman who rented a room in the house next door. The couple was determined to make the best of a bad situation. They poured time and money into transforming a former crack house into their new home. They put the incident with their neighbor behind them, but then it happened again.
Hey, you need to move your truck.
What? I'm in a normal spot. There's no other parking places.
Although she didn't even own a car, Griffin didn't want anyone parking in the public space in front of the house.
You can't live in fear in your own house. And it wasn't anything about the neighborhood. I mean, it was just this one woman, you know? I never felt threatened in my neighborhood.
A couple of days later, Jason was confronted again.
What's the problem?
You got your ladder on my property.
He couldn't see the evil. He didn't understand evil. His philosophy was, you get to know me, you won't hate me. And I tried to explain to him, some people don't want to know you.
Even though their confrontations were getting nastier, Jason still believed that he would win over Griffin.
You know what? I'm gonna get some of my tools out of my truck.
When we got home, I said, don't go out there, don't go. And he said, no, I'm gonna clean my truck. So I went out back to water the flowers.
There was no doubt in Deborah's mind who was responsible.
He's been shot!
Oh my God.
A neighbor drove Jason to the hospital. The bullet had caused extensive internal injuries. While emergency room doctors struggled to save Jason's life, Deborah was questioned by the police.
We just got word from the hospital. Jason didn't make it. I'm sorry.
Investigators later learned that right after the shooting, Griffin stole a car from a friend who lived only blocks from the murder scene. Denver police searched Griffin's home for clues to her background.
We found books and paperwork on how to make bombs and booby traps. We also found dummy hand grenades. The fuse was intact, but the cores had been removed.
They found the Anarchist's Cookbook and the Poor Man's James Bond, both favorite manuals of terrorists. They also discovered notebooks filled with Griffin's ramblings supporting a coming race war and the killing of white people. Authorities now believe that a racially motivated killer was on the loose.
She eluded our dragnet. The next time we found that car was approximately 2.5 days later in Iowa City, where the car had broken down. She befriended a man in Iowa City. He took her to a bus station, put her on a bus for Chicago.
After Chicago, Griffin's trail grew cold.
I had future plans with Jason, you know. He was an extremely positive person, so I tried to live my life the way he would. He would never hurt anybody. And I don't believe I'll meet someone like him again.
Update. The FBI arrested Maleka Griffin in El Cajon, California, after a co-worker realized that she was a fugitive. Griffin was working at a biotechnology firm under an assumed name. She was charged and convicted of murder, robbery, and vehicle theft. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.